One of the things that again, I think for the moment we're focusing on the transit of Saturn, but this could equally also apply to having it strong in your own chart. It's the necessity to individuate. So a lot of times, like somebody will say at their first Saturn return at 29 and 30, wow, it was so hard, but it forced me to get on my own feet. And there's even this idea, and I'll get to the second Saturn return in a minute. There's even this idea that a lot of people are carrying the karma of the family until then. So you might have, a lot of ideas about yourself. Oh, I'm powerless, or I'm not good enough, or I will always be a failure, but they're not even your beliefs. They could be the belief of your mother or your father or somebody else in the family. And so really part of what the Saturn return starts to let you do is it comes back around to the place that it was at birth, and it begins to say, you now have an opportunity to not just be running the energy of your family through you. You have the opportunity, especially we're lucky. Anybody who's doing this kind of work, you have tools. You have tools that allow you to start to individuate and go, well, what do I actually think about that? Am I just holding that belief because that's a belief that my mother held? Because that might have been like she didn't have an option other than holding that belief, but you've got all kinds of other options. That often happens under Saturn. And second Saturn return, I found, which is at like at 58 to 60, often for many people, it's easier. Because if you got some of these concepts down the first time around, you're coming hopefully into a place of that individuation and being on your own feet more. But also it can bring up, you get a lot of people at 58 and 60 where they finally come to that place of they're like, if they don't fall into that abyss, like the low octave of Saturn, oh, I'm getting older, and oh, I'm just spending my days looking to see, what's the latest wrinkle. If they don't get into all that stuff, which I'm going to do an aging course down the road before the year's out, and I'll address all that. But if you don't fall into that rabbit hole, and instead you go to the higher octave of Saturn, the second Saturn return often brings that place where you just really could care less about people's opinion of you. And there's this enormous freedom. Some people even come into that under their first Saturn return, where they're just like, this is who I am. This is what I'm here to do. If you love it, great. If you don't, it's okay. Adios. It's fine. Like, find what you love. That really can come out of that Saturnian experience of standing on your own feet. So that, Saturn to me in some ways is like a very relentless coach. It wants to bring out your strength. It wants to bring out your abilities. And especially if you're an old soul, sometimes the way it does it is by making you have to surrender your agenda first. Like, to go back to that example of the woman I knew who had Venus on and Saturn on her Venus, her agenda was all she wanted was to get back with her partner. But Saturn said, oh no, you've been giving yourself away in relationship from the time you were 13. First, we're going to get you on your own feet, and then we'll bring you a partner if that's what you need. So, all right, for those of you that are more psychologically oriented, I'm not going to get into this today, but there's actually this book. Liz Green is a Jungian psychologist, and she wrote a book called Saturn. I think it's called A New Look at an Old Devil. And if you're very psychological or you're a therapist or whatever, you might find that interesting. It just goes into a whole other angle of how to see it. But also, if you've tended to, like, let's say you have a strongly Neptunian chart, and the lower octave of Neptune, Pisces, again, lower octave, is like waiting for someone to save you. Who's going to save me? I can't do it. Who's going to fix this? Who's going to do this? Saturn comes along, and Saturn says, honey, I am going to show you how to start to be open to your own strength and your own power. It doesn't mean other people can't help you. But one of the things that happened when I just had Saturn going over my sun, I learned how to fix all these crazy things around my apartment. Things that in the past I would have always been like, oh, let me call a handy person or whatever. Saturn was there and it was like, no, I can actually show you how to fix a drain. I can show you. And it was so empowering. If you're willing to do the work under Saturn, you come into, it's like your superpower. You realize that, especially if you're a woman having this, so many things that you were taught you couldn't do were just part of the general misogyny of the culture, and you can do them. So